All right, as everybody comes in, welcome back to NeuroNIghts. This is our December 2020 edition of NeuroNIghts. So I'm just going to go through a couple things with everybody before we get to tonight's speakers, but just to make sure you know you're in the right place. NeuroNIghts, we're going to be talking about physical wellness. We're really going to be talking about exercise and intensity within that exercise. And we've got our speaker tonight, Jaclyn Caccese, who is one of our new but really cool researchers here at Ohio State. So, real quick, we're going to spend this whole month talking about physical wellness in this context. And so Meredith Banos is also joining us tonight. She'll be presenting next week on some more of our strategies as a follow-up. And so we're going to be thinking about things like, why is exercise beneficial? And in particular for after TBI. What are those truths that are out there? What might be some misconceptions that are out there? What are actually the recommendations? How can you get the most out of your exercise activities? And then, how do you actually do it? What can you do? Where can you go to get this into your day? So we'll get into some of that tonight and some of that next week. So then we're also at the end of this calendar year, and so we're looking at spring 2021. We've got some really, really cool ideas for sessions for next year. And so just so you know, we will be running this through at least May. That's what we have planned. If we're doing it on Zoom, there's no budget, so it's nice we can keep going. So some of the topics that we're thinking about in January, we're going to do reading and writing for health and wellness. So how do you tell your story or read other stories, in written form or in maybe other ways as well. But how do you tell that story? We know that it's good to, but what are the mechanisms? What are the skills that you might need in order to do that in a way that meets you where you're at? And what can you do with those stories beyond just your own personal benefit? For advocacy efforts. How can you learn from other stories? How can you educate your physician? Those kinds of things. In February, we're going to be learning about lessons from veterans with brain injuries. So we're going to have a couple folks that have been working with veterans individually, as well as the Defense and Veterans Brain Injury Center is going to come in and talk about some of their approaches. So if you have someone in your life who has served, if you have served yourself, I definitely recommend coming to that one. In March, we're going to be looking at new insights from research and kind of resetting what is a brain injury? How do we approach this? And so, you may have heard some of these things before, but hopefully this is updated information for you. And then through the rest of the summer, we're going to be looking at things like sleep, stress management, and integrative medicine. And so all those topics, we'll have a schedule for you soon. And some speakers lined up as well. But some good stuff coming up, I think. I helped craft that, so I think I'm biased, but I like it. And then a couple upcoming events. All of this you can get in an email. We'll put it all in an email for you. There is the State of Ohio's TBI Summit. It's on March 18th and 19th of 2021. If you're getting a lot of benefit out of NeuroNIghts, if you enjoy coming, definitely consider coming to that. We also have some grand round sessions where we're going to have doctors speak to other doctors and other types of clinicians about brain injury topics. And so those are open, and so you're welcome to join those as well. We can make that information out there for you. And then, of course, there's our Brain Injury 5K, which is the fundraiser for this program. Usually buys us the food, but you have to bring your own right now. And so, that will be in later March as well. We have more information coming up on that. So that's kind of the whole bit. I'll put it all in an email so that you can not have to deal with my voice and having to keep up with my pace today. So we will get to tonight's speaker. So Dr. Jaclyn Caccese, I've got it all written over here, so I'm going to look this way. Dr. Jaclyn Caccese is a biomedical engineer by training, who then moved into kinesiology and movement science. She studies how people move after brain injury, especially in the context of a sports concussion. And so I think Jackie's really cool for a bunch of reasons. She's really nice to work with. You'll enjoy her presentation, but also just what she's looking at. She's looking at how we react after a concussion and how our senses combine or don't combine and how that can affect the way that we move, maybe our injury risk after a concussion. And second, she uses just the coolest thing, this large virtual reality system that is behind her in her little block there. It barely fits into our gym, and she uses this to examine those reactions. So really, really cool stuff. If you want to nerd out about the VR stuff, go for it. So without any further ado, Dr. Jaclyn Caccese.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. Hopefully I can show off a little bit more of the VR system later, but you could kind of get a view now. And if we have time, I'll demonstrate on myself. I'll get up there and walk, and you guys can watch me do that. I'd love to have you all in the lab right now testing it out, but you'll have to watch me tonight. So first, we're going to start by talking about exercise in medicine, or exercise as medicine. Exercise is medicine. If I could put it in slideshow mode, great. So a lot of the things that I'll talk about today kind of originate in the concussion literature. The data that I show will be in the context of mild traumatic brain injury. But I think a lot of the ideas kind of transfer over, and then Meredith next week, I believe, will kind of highlight more of the work that they're doing in moderate to severe brain injury. So first, I think it's important to start with some of the benefits of exercise. And this really is not limited to individuals with brain injury. I mean, exercise for everyone has many positive aspects, and especially in the COVID era, where a lot of people are feeling somewhat isolated, they're not in their normal routine. Exercise can benefit in a number of ways, both psychologically, so working, helping reduce depression or anxiety, as well as physically, regulating blood pressure. And then in the context of brain injury, it really helps, although, across the board as well, with memory, attention, some of the things that sometimes people struggle with. It can decrease our reliance on assistive devices. So it can help with your balance and your coordination, which kind of helps you perform your activities of daily living more independently. So the scope of benefits of exercise is quite large. And I just want to highlight that there are many benefits, and they extend beyond brain injury. I also think it's important to note that the recommendations about exercise are changing, especially in the mild traumatic brain injury, the concussion realm. For a long time, when people sustained a brain injury, they were told to kind of more or less isolate. Don't do anything that gives them any symptoms. Sometimes they would tell you to sit in a dark room. They didn't want you on your phone. That's probably still good advice. But we're evolving to a point where now we're recommending exercise relatively early following brain injury. So the current recommendations for mild traumatic brain injury is a short period of relative rest, so 24 to 48 hours following brain injury, and then begin physical activity pretty much after that. It's important to note that when we talk about physical activity, and especially early following brain injury, this is really below symptom exacerbation. So below levels that really make you feel terrible. You might, increase your symptoms a little bit, but you don't want to be feeling really bad while you're exercising. And that's kind of where the initial recommendations came from. So it wasn't like it was out of nowhere that they said, sit in a dark room, don't do anything. There were studies in both humans and animals that suggested that excessive exercise and excessive cognitive activity, for that matter, may prolong recovery. So again, you want to be doing something, but not too much too soon. And when we're talking about too much, like something very strenuous. But now we know that early exercise benefits individuals, and even in individuals further out from their brain injury, they can really benefit from exercise. So this is in individuals with persistent post-concussive symptoms. So these are symptoms that, so brain injury tends to have lasting effects, but with mild traumatic brain injury, symptoms tend to recover quickly. There are some individuals, though, depending on the study, somewhere in the range of 10%, who do experience persistent symptoms following their concussion. Persistent symptoms is kind of in the range of about 2 weeks for adults and a month for kids. Kids tend to take a little bit longer to recover. And for this group, so for people who their symptoms don't recover right away, aerobic exercise seems to be very beneficial. So in this study, they compared aerobic exercise to stretching. So aerobic exercise is kind of that red color and stretching is the bluer color, the light blue. And you can see that over time, so they were evaluated over 6 weeks, and they asked people kind of what their symptoms are, gave them a checklist of different symptoms that they may have, and the individuals who participated in aerobic exercise recovered faster. And this has been replicated in a number of different studies. So it's showing that even with prolonged symptoms from injury, exercise does help. And then this is a more recent study. These are people acutely following injury. So right after that 24 to 48 hour time point, they're told, get out, exercise as much as you can. Well, maybe not as much as you can. They're prescribed a exercise. But the group who participated in aerobic exercise recovered faster than the group who participated in stretching only. And then, so let's talk a little bit about what kind of exercise is recommended. So if you are seeing a physical therapist, they can recommend exercise interventions. They could give you a prescription for exercise. To do this, there are a number of different ways. The PTs in Martha Morehouse in our outpatient rehab do a lot of exercise testing. So what that means is they'll have you like walk on a treadmill or if needed, bike on a recumbent bike, and they will measure your heart rate while you're doing this. And then they kind of see at what points you start to feel kind of lousy, at what points your symptoms really increase. And they will tell you what that is. And depending on the situation, if you have access to a heart rate monitor, they may tell you to exercise at a certain percentage of your heart rate. And usually this is daily, right? So you want to get some exercise each day. Without testing, so if you're not in a situation where they can do exercise testing, they can sometimes calculate your approximate heart rate. So one way to estimate this would be 220 minus your age in years. And then they will tell you to begin exercising at some percentage of your maximum heart rate. Sometimes it's recommended about 50% of your maximum heart rate. If you don't have access to a heart rate monitor, there are other ways to do this. They can give you a list of symptoms and tell you, okay, if you increase by 2 on a scale of 0 to 10, for example, that's a good point to stop. So you're kind of using those symptoms to determine when you should stop. And again, it's not like any increase is bad. You just don't want it to be too strenuous. I do want to mention that especially acutely following brain injury, aerobic exercise is recommended over resistance exercises like weightlifting. When you have a brain injury, sometimes you can't tolerate like wide swings in blood pressure, which happens when you do more of the anaerobic, like lifting, things that are more strenuous. So good examples of this would be things like stationary biking, brisk walking or jogging, or swimming. Swimming is sometimes a little bit challenging because if you are trying to do it based on your heart rate, sometimes that can be challenging to record your heart rate while swimming, but you could even do like, water jogging or something like that, but really focus on the aerobic exercise. I think it's also important to kind of talk about strategies to succeed with exercise. So you want it to be something that you enjoy. You don't want it to be something that you hate doing every day. So if you don't like biking, you can try walking or jogging or swimming. The other thing is that you can ask people to do it with you. If you don't like doing it alone, I mean, maybe in the COVID era, it's a little hard, but you could get one of your household family members to walk with you or to try biking with you. Sometimes you need to make accommodations for your needs and your abilities. And PTs are great for helping you determine what type of activities might be safe for you to do. So I think if you are interested in getting involved in exercise, either talk to your physician, your physical therapist, or an exercise physiologist, and they could kind of help you develop an exercise prescription. There are certainly some challenges that people with brain injuries, but even people without brain injuries face in terms of getting in the recommended amount of physical activity. So one being sometimes people are unable to drive. So there are different things you could do. You could try public transportation or ride sharing, but there are also a lot of exercises that you could do at home. In the aerobic exercises, there's certainly walking, which can be done most places. But even if you get to the point where you want to do some balance training, there are ways to do that safely from your home. Same thing with more strength training. There are ways to do body weight support or body weight training. So you don't need a lot of equipment to still get a good workout in. Sometimes there are physical limitations. Again, PTs and exercise physiologists, along with a lot of physicians, can also help you develop an exercise program that accommodates for your physical limitations. There are modified exercises. There are machines made for different levels of physical abilities. You could try group or club-based activities, and there are also adaptive sports, and we'll talk at the end about some within Columbus. Sometimes also cognitive limitations can be a barrier. And so I think here having a structured routine helps. This is probably true for everyone. I know for myself, when I'm on a routine, I tend to be more focused and, able to get things done. So that can assist you with remembering what exercises you do. So essentially each day you do kind of the same workout or similar, or during the week, Monday you might do one thing, Tuesday you do a different thing. So you kind of stay on a routine. You can write the exercises down. So if you do meet with a physical therapist and they give you some exercises to do, it might be good to make a list for yourself then, and you can kind of chart over time. If it's something like strength training, you could talk about the weight you use, the number of reps that you did. And it not only helps with cognitive limitations, but it also allows you to see your progress over time. So you can see how you've gotten better. If it's aerobic activity, maybe one day you could only walk for 2 minutes before you didn't feel well. And over time, maybe you get up to 20 minutes or even an hour. And you can also use timers or alarms to help you keep a schedule. So if you want to work out every day, maybe you're not a first thing in the morning type of person. Maybe you like to work out after you eat dinner. And so you could set a timer on your phone so that you remember that it's your time to work out that day. A couple things about different types of activities that you may enjoy. So I said about aerobic activities, especially acutely following brain injury. These are low impact activities like biking, walking, or swimming. Sometimes balance is an issue. A lot of times balance is an issue. And so there are alternatives for this. The recumbent bike is an option. It's a low impact aerobic activity that doesn't really require balance. There are also water exercises. If you don't like swimming, there's even like water jogging or water aerobics, which are all great modes for training and that kind of limit your risk of falling. I also think, so my area of interest, research, expertise is in balance. And so there are different types of balance training you could do. Balance training is really important for individuals with brain injury. It improves your coordination, your agility. It also oftentimes improves your muscle strength, which over time not only reduces the risks of falls, but also improves your fear of falling. And so a couple examples of balance training, things like yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi. We have someone at OSU who's using dancing for an intervention, which one of the areas of improvement is certainly going to be balance as well in that domain. And so doing this like 2 to 3 times a week is probably a good recommendation. With aerobic exercises, you could really do that daily. Flexibility, so this is like stretching. I think this is also really important for everyone, including individuals with brain injury, because it increases range of motion, it reduces stiffness, it can help if you have some spasticity, or really any reduced flexibility. And so there are different stretches you can do for each muscle group, and you kind of want to do this as often as possible. A lot of times after waking up, after a workout, or before going to bed, just to kind of improve your mobility. And then strength training, again, isn't something you want to do acutely following brain injury, but over time throughout your course of recovery, you can start introducing this. You might be interested in doing circuit machines, or resistance bands, or just using body weight exercises, anything body weight exercises you can do from home. And one important thing here is that regardless of the type of exercise you choose, whether it's circuits or resistance bands or just body weights, you want to make sure that you are balanced before you start. You don't want to risk falling or sustaining further injuries. So make sure that your balance is good before you progress with strength training. And again, 2 to 3 times a week, you can incorporate strength training. So how do you get started? Let's say you are really interested in exercise. First, you probably want to talk to your healthcare provider, your physician, your physical therapist, somebody just to make sure that you're doing it safely. Another thing is that it may be easier to focus on your exercises if you avoid busy, crowded locations. Doing things at home is always great. Processing really busy environments can sometimes be tough and can throw off balance and increase dizziness and things like that. So you want to make sure you're doing it safely. So sometimes doing it kind of in a more isolated environment is good. It might also help to have a workout buddy. This can motivate you and can help you if you have difficulties with balance. You don't have to be as nervous. It can also help you find your way throughout a community if you go out for a walk, and maybe you're afraid that you won't know your way. Well, if you take a buddy with you, that might help. You can also start all of these slowly and progress. So we do want to get the intensity up over time and the duration up over time, but you can start low and then gradually build up. And then, you don't have to feel bad taking a break. So take breaks as needed. The goal is to get your intensity up and your duration up over time. There are a couple things that you want to be careful of. You don't want to increase your risk of falling, so you have to make sure that you begin each exercise in a stable position. So again, especially with the weightlifting, I think that's probably the area where there's some risk, as well as riding a bike. Make sure you always do that with a helmet. That is critical. And then you may need to make some modifications to accommodate your needs in terms of exercise equipment. And then again, don't hesitate to ask for demonstrations. If you're seeing a physical therapist or an exercise physiologist or a friend, ask them to help you to make sure that you're doing your exercises properly. Within the state of Ohio, there are a number of different organizations that provide adaptive sports options. I think Kadar may have sent out the slides for this presentation. So if you are interested in any of these organizations, There's groups that are rowing, walking, kayaking. I mean, you could pretty much find a group to do any activity that you're interested in. And all of these organizations are looking for volunteers as well. So if someone you know is interested in volunteering, or if you yourself are interested in volunteering, these can all be good options. And always remember to consult with a physician before starting your exercise program. But again, exercise is fantastic for individuals with brain injury, so we really want to promote that as much as possible. And increasing intensity and duration over time will really give you a lot of positive benefits. So that's kind of the presentation. I think maybe now if there are any questions, I'm happy to take questions, and then I can show you a short demo in the VR system if you're interested.
So Carol had asked, about exercise advice for survivors with limited mobility. I know we got into quite a lot of that. So Carol, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask if there was something missed.
Yes. So, I mean, Carol, feel free to unmute yourself, but just to kind of highlight on that again, I think there are still a lot of options that people can do, even with limited mobility. Some of the adaptive sports might be great options, but even at your home, there are many options available. Chair exercises that you can do. If you do have a facility where you can get to a recumbent bike, sometimes even with limited mobility, you could do that. I think there are options available to you. So I would encourage you to reach out to a physician or a physical therapist that you may be working with to kind of prescribe some exercises for you. And maybe Meredith can even jump in if you have something specific to say as well.
Sure. I was going to say this is a great precursor for next week. I'd be happy to delve into some of those more specifically. And if anyone has any very specific questions, like if anyone is a wheelchair user or that sort of thing, I'd be happy to come up with ideas to share next week. You're setting the stage nicely, Jackie. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad that I could line it up for you to bat next.
So does anybody else have a question? Oh, Carol, there you go.
Okay, I was trying to unmute all that time. Sorry.
All right.
So I was trying to incorporate what was presented with what my daughter has limited mobility and is slower moving. So to get her heart rate up is the tricky part. She's tried swimming, horseback riding, recumbent, but she's slower. So I don't know if her heart rate is actually increasing. And it sounds like aerobic is important to include. Does that make sense?
It does. Go ahead, Meredith.
A good starting point is just finding a way to monitor heart rate. So that's the first step to all of this. We don't know if we're exercising at an appropriate intensity unless we are actually monitoring heart rate. And you might be surprised. She might be achieving it much more readily than you would expect. There's oftentimes we've found that people just getting dressed or just doing a simple task is getting their heart rate in that target heart rate zone.
Okay.
I would maybe say one other thing, heart rate is not the end all be all. So a lot of people are on different medications that would blunt their heart rate or affect their heart rate. So if that's the case, if she's on any sort of medication that would have any sort of impact on her heart rate, you would want to go more based on a perceived exertion scale, like Jackie was talking about. So sort of if you would give someone, 0 through 10, how hard are you exercising? You want them sort of in the mid to upper range to achieve the same benefits that we've discussed tonight. So you would want someone exercising maybe at a 6 or a 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
That's a great question. And so I actually had a sort of a follow-up to that. So just as a consumer advice, right? There's so many different devices out there for measuring your heart rate, or you can think about your blood pressure, your oxygenation. If you're not going to get this through your physician or through an insurer, what would you recommend people think about using? And it's not necessarily a brand, but just like a kind of a thing.
The prices have come down. It's been nice with that.
Yeah, that I think that was a barrier for some time. So again, I think first and foremost, you can go based off of perceived exertion. But if you do have a heart rate monitor available, and that is something you're interested in, there are different types of heart rate monitors. The chest strap is probably going to be the most accurate, but I know that some people find it uncomfortable or don't want to use it. They do tend to be a little bit more expensive. You can get away with like the wristwatch if you're just kind of trying to get an idea of where your heart rate is. It's not going to be super accurate, but it will at least give you an idea of relative exertion. And if Meredith has any other inputs, but that would be my suggestions.
Cheapest thing is just to take your pulse.
Which
is hard to do in real time when you're exercising, but there's two very simple ways to take your pulse. It might seem silly, but some people don't know this. Just taking 2 fingers and putting it on your wrist, more towards the thumb side of your wrist than towards your pinky. And you should just be able to feel your heart rate, and you would count how many beats you feel per minute, and that gives you your heart rate. You can also feel in your neck. That's sometimes easier to actually feel, just right at your jawline where your jaw meets your neck. There's some things associated with that. That's not the best, most reliable spot, especially when you're exercising, but either one of those, that's a cheap, easy way to know, are you elevating your heart rate or not?
And you don't want to be pushing too hard. Just like a light touch will be enough to feel it.
Yeah. And then again, so many of these products are becoming very consumer available. Fitbits, Apple Watches, like Jackie said, the Polar chest strap is one of the most reliable ones. There are also just really simple apps that you can download for free on any smart device. Like at one point a long time ago, before any of this stuff was popular, I had just downloaded a free app that you held your finger over your camera, and it had a way of sensing your heart rate. I don't know how accurate it was, but it at least gives you a sense of if you're elevating your heart rate in response to exercise or not.
Right. Like some of these things you might not need to know specifically. Like you might not need to use that necessarily for your exercise prescription, but at least you can get an idea, if your heart rate's going up relatively.
That's a good point, Jackie. And I was wondering about, I could spend the money and get the chest strap. I could certainly spend the money and get a really nice, smartwatch that has those features. And of course, then people are going to text me all day long, and I'm going to see it all day long. But I guess how accurate do we need to be? Do we need to be down to like +1 or 2, or?
So I think it kind of depends on what you need. So for our athletes returning to play, who are going to be back out on the field, participating in vigorous activity, we want to make sure that their heart rate is getting high enough that we can be confident that we are safely returning them to play and they don't have some type of exercise intolerance. That's a little bit different than if you're kind of more long-term looking to increase your level of activity. Probably in that case, some relative measure to say, okay, I know that my heart rate went up when I worked out today, is probably a good starting point.
Very good. Okay. Are there any other questions out there?
All right, so just a quick 2 minutes, and if anybody has any questions, feel free, but I just want to give you a quick demo. So this is our virtual reality system. It may be hard to see because it's a little dark, but there's a treadmill here. So what we are trying to do is kind of combine exercise and visual motion. So it can be very hard for people following brain injury to interpret sensory stimuli, so like visual information. And sometimes if you're like I talked about with exercise in a busy environment, sometimes when there's a lot of things fast moving, you can kind of get dizzy or not feel well. Sometimes people get a headache. And so what we're trying to do is give people all of that at once. So give them exercise with some visual information. So the scene will move as I move, and we can do all kinds of things as people are walking to kind of understand how they're using visual information. And we're going to be partnering with some of the PTs in Martha Morehouse to hopefully design some interventions for people who are having problems with the visual feedback. So I'm just going to put on a quick markers. So we use reflective markers like this, and that will see kind of where I am and how I'm moving. So I'll put one on my head, and I'll put one on my back. And I set this system up hours ago, so hopefully it's still working.
And so just to give everybody a sense of the scale here, if you think about you're putting on the goggles and everything that you see is immersing you in the VR, this whole thing is so big that you feel like you're already in it and you're not wearing anything on your head. It's what, Jackie? It's 15 feet tall, 15 feet wide.
Yes. Yep. So, and if
It's
you
pretty huge.
as I move, can you see that? Is that like visible?
Does everybody kind of see that moving back and forth?
Yep. And then if I start to walk, it will walk with me. Hold on. Bear with me a moment.
Can everybody still hear Jackie okay?
Yeah.
So as I walk, the scene will move, which sorry, of course, the one time I set it up, then it doesn't like time out.
Okay, while we're troubleshooting, I actually have a question. Meredith, maybe you can answer this for us.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So we talked about, adaptive sports, which I think is a really cool thing to consider because it's not just exercise, but it's also socialization. And we talked about socialization in a lot of our previous NeuroNights, about just kind of that value of interacting with people. Also, we think about sports in the same way, right? It's not just about playing the sport, it's about the teamwork and, working as a group and so on. So there's all these other benefits. And so I'm just wondering, Meredith, when you're approaching, prescribing this, do you think about exercise with caregivers? Do you think about exercise with other peers? What about like pets and animals that you might go on a run or a walk with? How do you approach that?
Sorry, go ahead, Meredith.
That's interesting, Kater. That's a good point. Specific to the context that I'm normally working in, I'm a physical therapist that works at Dodd in inpatient rehab. So a lot of the people I'm interacting with are not yet independent with mobility. So we do a lot of prescription to set people up with things that they can do independently. It's an interesting thought that you've posed there, just saying, do we get the caregivers involved? I mean, we certainly educate the caregivers to help facilitate the exercise programs that we put people on, but typically we try to make it accommodate whatever and match whatever that person's activity level is at that current time. But certainly we are connected with the adapted sports and that sort of thing for the reasons you mentioned, to make sure that people are experiencing that socialization and all those things as well.
Gotcha. Cool. All right, Jackie, are you ready?
Yep, I think so.
Okay.
Anyway, so you can see that as I walk, the scene is moving with me. And if I speed up to the point where I start to run, I can go faster. If I really wanted to go slower, I can slow down. And I get some feedback too about my position, which may look kind of disorienting because it's moving with my head. So it looks more natural when you're the person walking in the scene. I think it's also important to note that when we have participants in to do this, they are in a harness the entire time. So part of the goal is to kind of give you the opportunity to explore your environment in a safe environment. And so I don't have a harness on right now because I've done this thousands of times, but that would certainly be part of the protocol. And then the goal would be over time, we can make the scene more, move more with your head to kind of retrain individuals to use that visual information.
Wow,
That makes sense.
Pretty cool stuff.
Was that thing
So
they can make it move, be more responsive to your head.
yep, exactly. And so I think it's also kind of cool that you could walk at your own pace. So and the visual flow will match as well. So the treadmill automatically speeds up or slows down as you speed up or slow down.
And Jackie, so a lot of what you were talking about, I mean, I know your research on the background here, and so when you have something that's jarring or something that's meant to sort of distract you, right? Here this is it's a very nice scene. There are things that are moving around, but it's pretty peaceful, I think. What if it's not peaceful? I mean, do you do that kind of stuff in the VR cave, and
Yep.
what do people, how do people react?
Yeah, so we do a couple different things, and we're starting to hopefully do some more as well. So we can do things like rotate the scene to kind of simulate as if you were to fall. And so we can learn how people react when visual cues might suggest that they're falling, and hopefully also over time train them. So if they are in an environment where they suddenly become unstable, they can use that visual information more effectively to regain balance. We also do things, the light posts, which maybe you can't see from here, but there are light posts as I walk, and we can make those fall down to give people obstacles to cross over, to help with some of the obstacle crossing and navigating more complex environments. The other thing we can do is we can make you do two things at once. So there are birds that can fly through the scene to just be a distractor in one case. We can also put up words and make you read the words. So the one that we typically do is like, we'll put up colors, and sometimes the words will match. So it'll be like red written in red font. And sometimes they won't. So it'll be like the word red written in blue font. And we'll ask you to say what the word says, not what the color is, or vice versa. And so we're making you do two things at the same time. We can make you think while you're walking.
I can never get those right.
It's hard, it's funny
can
because
never do it.
we had a lab demo in here last week, and a college age, really physically active Guy gets up there and he slows down when he's doing that. You know, he's not walking as fast. So it's interesting to kind of challenge people in unique ways.
Have you ever done things like with, I'm just thinking about, you know, like real world stuff. What about like rain?
So we don't have other environmental effects yet.
Okay.
We can make it dark. We can make it look like night. We can actually do anything. How useful it is, we're still trying to figure that out. So what we do know is that the visual information tends to be disturbing to people. So that's kind of the first area that we're trying to tackle. But it's certainly easy to make it rain. I have a scene that I put up around Christmas sometimes with snow falling, that you could walk through the snow, not really to understand the effects of snow, just to make it look realistic. So I figured since everybody's been inside and it's been kind of cold lately, I'd put up a nice warm park scene, but
Very appreciated.
kind of put you anywhere.
And so I was just thinking about this because Perry's on the call here, and I know Perry and I are both video gamers. And so what I'm wondering is, okay, so we don't all have access to this type of setup, and even a VR setup it might not be appropriate or safe for someone. But if you're going to be playing video games, things like that, I've been playing Mario Kart today. Not today, I was working today. I was playing Mario Kart the other day. You know, can those be therapeutic? Can those help with the retraining?
Yeah.
Is there research on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I think that's a good place to start. So there are some challenges with the out of the box systems, like some of the VR systems, and even like video games, because they're
VR
not
for a PlayStation or Xbox.
So VR is for virtual reality.
Yeah,
and there
right.
are.
I was told by my family not to do it. Period. I mean, they don't want me doing it, but later said it might be good for us.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So there have been a lot of studies that have used virtual reality as a rehabilitation tool for individuals following brain injury. I think a good place to start is in a place like this, where you can do it in a safe environment. Probably if you're sitting on the couch and, you know, you don't risk falling or something like that, it can be done. You just want to make sure that you're always doing it safely.
That's probably I do it alone. This is why they're telling me not to do it.
Yeah, like
I don't do it.
If you're jumping around the house with the head-mounted display on that you can't see anything in your environment, probably not a great place to start.
Hey, grad last quarter told me, or semester, I keep saying quarter, I went to Ohio State years ago, but semester, and I know what to say now. I go to a group down there, and he said he like knocked a cup over with pop in it and all this stuff by accident.
But like other video games, like the Nintendo Wii has a lot of interactive. I mean, that can be considered virtual reality, right? You're interacting in a virtual environment, and that would be a great tool as well. That could be therapeutic. And the nice thing about that is it doesn't go on your head. The one challenge you just want to make sure is that you're always doing things safely, that you have balance when you're starting. And throughout the activity. So if the Nintendo Wii, if you can, you know, play tennis and still maintain balance, I'd say go for it.
Right.
So again, some of the challenge with the head-mounted displays isn't that the scene is particularly disturbing. It's just that you can't see anything else in your environment. And so that's actually why we have a system here that you don't put over your head so that you can walk through it and kind of get some exercise benefit as well from it.
Yeah, it's just a little expensive.
Yeah, it is. But you know, I think over time we will get to a point.
Xbox would be sold out of them.
Yeah. I think we'll get to a point where you can do more of this in your typical video game systems. I mean, even the head-mounted displays now, like the newest Oculus, has a feature that you could set a boundary, and when you step out of the boundary, you could see your surroundings. So the nice thing about that option is if you have a room and let's say you have couches and things in it that you don't want to trip over, you can set the boundary to be within your open area. And then if you step outside of that area, so you have like a safety zone, right? And if you step outside of that area, now you can see your environment. So if you are worried about tripping over a couch or something in the middle of playing tennis in your virtual environment, that might be an option that at least then you can see your surroundings when you exit some boundary that you set.
See, these are not conversations I expected to have 5 years ago. So this.
Yeah.
So Nicole had asked a question. I think Nicole, if I'm not mistaken, you're a student here. So she said, your research is very interesting. What kind of results have you seen from patients working with this kind of technology? So can you kind of give us like that, 3 or 4 minute kind of spiel on some of the recent work you've done?
Yeah, of course. So most of my work has been with mild traumatic brain injury, and in that setting, not really acutely, but subacutely. So like people who are 2 weeks to 6 months out, and then individuals who had a mild traumatic brain injury like years ago. And in both of those populations, visual information, so we test that using virtual reality. So kind of, even if you have a person stand, if you move a scene, so let's say you have up a black screen with like pyramids on it, just like white pyramids, right? It's kind of boring, but it works. So you have a black screen with some white pyramids, and those pyramids move back and forth. When you do that, people, what's called entrain, so their body moves with the pyramids. Whether or not they know they're doing it is a different question, but they just naturally start to move with them. And what we find is that people following brain injury move a lot more. So they're a lot more disturbed by this visual information. And sometimes it also makes them symptomatic. So they start to get a headache or feel dizzy or nauseous. And that doesn't happen in people who haven't had a brain injury. The same is with their inner ear balance system. So you have an inner ear balance system, and that kind of has the same effect as the virtual reality, that they are more disturbed by the sensory information. So that's kind of what we know. We know that sensory information is disturbing. What we're hoping to do is learn how to make it better. And so we haven't done any interventions yet, but I am meeting with the PTs at Martha Morehouse, and we're hopefully going to come up with a plan for how to move forward. So hopefully we will have some interventions so we can learn how to make people better navigate through their environment and with fewer problems with visual information.
I just volunteered for a thing where I got a cell phone for free. I don't know. They didn't give it to me. They loaned it to me for about 9 months now, though. But with the virus, though, that kind of messed it up because you take public transportation.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But that got dangerous right in March. So they couldn't read how many people were taking their device or using it.
Yeah, I think that study's actually, we have a graduate student in our department who's involved in that project. Like the smart bus or whatever it's called.
Yeah, oh yeah. I've been learning, I've known CODA for a long time, but I have several different health problems that cause that.
Yeah. No, that's a great program. And that's very much a virtual intervention as well. And so hopefully we can get other people in here to
It wasn't just Columbus that had the problem. New York City shut down half their subway system, I think, when the coronavirus hit. I mean, because they didn't want people getting it. My voice is sounding weird.
No, you sound, yeah.
Okay. For a couple seconds then.
No, you were very clear. Yeah, that's definitely, it has affected
a lot.
Transportation a lot, yeah.
So I'm going to jump in here. We've only got 5 more minutes, so I want to ask one last question. Jackie, you said the work you're doing is with people that have mild traumatic brain injury, but probably a couple years ago, or maybe even further back, and you're starting to see some, at least what's happening with them, right? And so this question is for Jackie and Meredith. Um, what do we know about recovery and exercise where you're a few years out from your injury? You know, you've gone through PT, you've gone through you know, just self recovery, whatever that might have been, and you get to this plateau, or you get to a place where you know you're just not seeing that many gains, and then you come back to exercise. What do we know about that phase, and how can exercise help or help even more maybe?
So I am not aware of any studies in the concussion population that have really looked at um, like if you kind of reach a plateau and then come back to exercise later. But what I can say is in people even years down the line who are experiencing symptoms that they attribute to their concussion, it does seem to help a lot. And I
I
would,
should do something then.
yeah, I would think that in general,
I did
exercise
for a
has
while,
many
but
benefits.
And I can tack on to that. This is a perfect cliffhanger for next week. So thank you, Kedar. But I'll be talking about next week a clinical practice guideline that has been published in the physical therapy literature specific to people that are chronic and that are greater than 6 months post traumatic brain injury. And this clinical practice guideline gives recommendations for exercise intensity. And we know that there are improved outcomes specific to walking for people that are greater than 6 months out that are achieving these exercise recommendations.
That I had put that one out there on purpose. See, I was learning my story structure when we were planning this narrative medicine one, so it's all coming together. So it's 7:28. I just want to take a couple seconds then to just thank Dr. Caccese, Meredith for coming tonight. We're looking forward to Meredith's presentation next week. But Jackie, thank you for sharing all this and sharing your setup. There was a recent article on Jackie. We'll send that out to all of you so you can learn a little bit more about her work. And hopefully at some point we're recruiting for these studies and we can bring people into the clinics. So, you know, if this is something that piques your interest, you know, keep an ear out.
Yeah, and hopefully you were able to see. Normally I would have like somebody else videoing, but with the COVID protocol, I
makes
can't
it
have anyone
hard.
in the lab
Oh,
at
yeah,
this
I thought
point.
of that immediately. I was like, yeah, the Zoom is making it a little bit hard, probably, if that's what
Yeah.
you're doing.
But you know, I think it worked okay. I think it worked okay. I think we could,
I saw it. I could see it.
but
Great.
it is way different in person.
Yeah, so hopefully post-COVID we can get you all in to give it a try.
It's in the same building that we used to do the in-person NeuroNIghts. So just a quick little, we'll call it a field trip. So thanks everybody. Have a great night. Stay safe and stay well, and we'll see you next week.
Okay,
Bye.
great. Thanks.